Symbiote Spider-Man King in Black Issue 1 heads to Ravencroft, where Alistair Smythe is met by his supposedly dead father. The undead man says he's actually not the man's father, he's just using this form because it's less intimidating. The being asks if he remembers Lewis Tuttle, since he was the being's previous host. He explains that he cannot exist in this realm without a host, but Alistair is confused as the being says that he wants the man to be his new host, and in return, he will make it so that Alistair can walk again. The man jumps at the deal as above Earth, Uatu the Watcher finds himself despising his ability to see everything, especially when he can't do anything to stop it. He knows that that's beyond his race's parameters, and while people see them as angels, he knows his race's original name is lost to time, instead just called the Watchers now. Soon a ship comes to the Watcher, picking him up, and since he didn't foresee this coming, he thinks this will prove quite interesting. In New York, a small child is saved from the speeding traffic by the Symbiote Spider-Man. Peter knows that despite the heroics, he's going to be late to the Bugle, but Jameson will have to just deal with it. Kid thinks he was saved by Daredevil as Peter changes clothes, knowing it figures that he does something nice and someone else gets the credit for it. He knows at least things are back to normal, and while Felicia is mad at him, she'll have to get over it, and besides, he doesn't do all this for the credit. Peter heads into work, learning from Jameson that he will be going with Ned Leeds to see Alistair Smythe, who wants to talk to the paper. Peter wonders why the Spider Slayer wants to see them, so Ned says the guy is claiming to have made some cybernetic implants that can help paralyzed people walk again. Pete thinks that he's trying to fix his public image, knowing that that always ends well. Peter thinks that maybe Alistair really is trying to change, but you can never really tell with the bad guys. Elsewhere, the Watcher finds that he was taken by Kang the Conqueror, who wants to use the Watcher's knowledge of humanity to learn more about them, intending on extracting it from his head so he can save the universe. Uatu knows that Kang is a blind fool, since the villain has connected him to his ship's AI, allowing him to use his psionic power to absorb all of Kang's knowledge instead. Uatu begins to see the future, seeing what Kang has seen. Because of the horrors he sees, the computer explodes. Kang tries to disconnect the being, but it's too late as the system goes into a full reset. Kang orders his ship to get Uatu out of it, activating the Omega emergency override. The ship explodes however, but Kang survives the explosion, knowing it's just fabulous that he tries to save the universe and this happens. Alistair meanwhile continues his experiments with the injections that should make him walk. Monica asks what he's injecting himself with and if there's been proper testing, but he reveals that it's not the only thing he's made, as there is a tank of it pumping it into the ventilation system right now. Monica begins choking as outside, Peter and Ned arrive. Before going inside, Peter's spider sense triggers, alerting him to a strange solar eclipse above. Alistair finds the eclipse glorious, knowing as events in the future happen, it ripples back through the past and history rewrites itself. Alistair goes to see Monica, who is undergoing a transformation. He tells her that she looks better this way, wanting her to breathe in the gas and become one of his slaves, just like Alistair is. He finds it a shame that Jameson declined to come himself, but he knows the reporters that Jameson sent will have to do. Ned soon becomes infected by the gas as Peter finds him and others are changed into symbiote shadow people. Suiting up, Spider-Man is attacked by the possessed Ned and others. Knowing that they aren't in control of themselves, Peter knows he needs to pull his punches. But hitting the possessed Ned makes the being surprised, as if it thought Peter couldn't hit it. Dodging the being's attacks, Peter heads up the elevator shaft to look for the source of the danger, following his spider sense. More symbiotes come for him as he reaches the top of the building, finding Alistair Smythe, who undergoes a transformation of his own into a symbiote that calls itself Mr. E. Peter makes a pun about the name as the symbiote recognizes Peter's, hugging him and calling him brother. Peter smashes the villain away, forcing it outside the window and onto the side of the building. Peter gives chase but is captured by the symbiote Smythe, who demands to know why his brother would attack him, since they are meant to be on the same side and serve their god. Peter doesn't think they do, freeing himself from the alien's grip. Mr. E tries to talk to the symbiote Spider-Man, but Peter knows that they are not brothers, and if he did think that, he wouldn't be one to a shadow wannabe. The villain doesn't understand the references as Peter punches right through him, allowing the symbiote to headbutt him and keep him locked in place. Mr. E says that they are indeed king, representing the natural order, and their people were there at the very beginning and shall continue until the very end, unlike the cosmic blip that is humanity. Mr. E continues to headbutt the trapped Peter, knocking him down and telling him him to stop his games and to stop pretending he's not something he's not. Peter tells himself to concentrate, realizing that the Shadow Ned was surprised when he attacked him, since maybe the symbiote thought that he would punch through him like he just did with Mr. E. Peter realizes that he needs to clear his mind, so doing so allows him to actually hit Mr. E instead of passing through him. This angers the symbiote, who grows in size and demands that his games end now. A voice says that they will be ending as the Black Knight arrives, throwing his sword at the symbiote and injuring it. Black Knight demands to know if he is responsible for the eclipse, but all Mr. E will say is that creation moves forward and uncreation moves backwards as he escapes. Peter asks his friend what happens now, but the knight doesn't know, hoping that there are answers out there somewhere. In deep space, Kang is suddenly found by a ship, which brings him on board, where he is met by Rocket Raccoon, who demands to know who the time-traveling being is. Symbiote Spider-Man, King in Black Issue 1 kicked off the King in Black tie-ins by bridging the series set in the past with the present in a fun and interesting way. It was pretty cool to see Knull's early attempts to take over Earth and the universe and unmake everything, with Kang getting involved, which makes the story even more interesting since I'm intrigued to see how it connects up to the actual present day event that is starting this week, and if we might actually get to see some time travel shenanigans with the Symbiote Spider-Man maybe joining the battle against Knull in the present, or people being sent back to the past to maybe stop him. This issue definitely puts forth some interesting developments within the King in Black storyline, and I'm hoping it has some payoffs, especially considering that one could look at this series as being a little bit disconnected from the main Marvel continuity, seeing as the Symbiote Spider-Man book is set in the far past and not set in present day like every other Marvel book really is. Nevertheless, I'm intrigued to see where this series is going and how it connects up to King in Black in the larger scale of things. I'm going to give this issue an 8 out of 10.